Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you have chosen to spend some of your time with us here today. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we have compiled a list of people who we want to recognize. So we're gonna get to that at some point. Um, but yeah, just welcome.
We also have a list of who's been naughty, but we're not going to share that. I'm reminded of when Elon Musk tweeted a little crosstab of Santa, of Father Christmas and Lucius Cornelius Sola, and his list and he had each of the boxes checked, and his list of checked boxes was, knows if you've been naughty or nice, is making a list, and is checking it twice, and is coming to town. So. Just to share that brilliant work of Chairman Musk. Ryan, sorry, I swear to God, I'm not going to turn this into a Catskills humor event.
Oh, well, I might feel a little bit relaxed if you did because I have very little experience being an MC. I could do my best here, but I am not an MC by nature. Um, should we, Jack? What do you think? Should we just jump into the list right away?
Let's do
If
it.
anyone who's here is there anyone downstairs who has not figured out the GatherTown interface here?
There might be, but I'm recording, so I can't. Uh,
All right, can
Uh,
someone
I'll
go
jump.
downstairs and corral
I got it.
any?
I'll
All
walk
right.
around and
Oh,
look for any
thank you,
possible.
thank you, Justin.
Got it.
Any stragglers? We really, it would be a nice goal in 2025 to get off of Gather and into Turf. That would be a neat thing to do. We'll see if it's possible, but
And something that we thought would be a really nice idea is to for each of these people that we want to honor and recognize, for them to come on stage and share the spotlight with Curtis for a few minutes to yeah, just talk about what it is
to
that we
say
want to
to
recognize them
say
for.
some stuff.
Yeah.
Um, to say some stuff.
Hmm.
And 1 second. Um, and who are we? I'm just trying to undo a thing. And are going to start with Stuart.
so let's start with.
Stuart, are you with there? Sarla. Oh, Sarlev has children. He's infested with rugrats, and so he can't come on stage because that would put his children on stage, and that is not a place that children should be. Sarlev has been an invaluable community member, and including creating a very, very valid and working use case for Urbit, which is his microfunding apps and fund. He hosted the subassembly conference somewhere in the rainy mists of Washington State, which went very well. A number of guests were attacked by the poisonous slugs that frequent the area, but other than that, things were fine. No serious injuries, fortunately, but you should be careful in those woods. And overall has been a very serious Urbit booster and believer, and has also been starting to do some work on one of our next projects, which is the which is something he's already worked on, which is essentially Urbit for what we're somewhat decorously calling crypto native small businesses. So if you can picture a crypto native small business, you should picture that, because that's kind of becoming a focus in a way. And he's just a good guy, and we're told that he's replacing that tooth. And he's amazing. He's like really sweet, and we love him. Stuart, can you say something even though you can't come on stage?
I can do quick color commentary. You can have my Urbit numbers idea. You can have my
Mm-hmm.
Urbit for small business idea. You can even
Mm-hmm.
have my Urbit hangers idea, but do not try and credit me with login with master ticket. I won't allow it.
It's important in these speeches, by the way. I may roast you, so it's important to roast me. Yes, one thing I've forgotten, to mention about Stuart is that he's very he's a strong-willed person, and he speaks his mind. And when I have stupid ideas like logging in with your master ticket, I'm not sure what else you would do with it, but he will come out, and he's a mild-mannered person, except when he can't be a mild-mannered person, and we love him for that. And All right, let's bring forward. Wait. Ryan, do you want to announce the award? There needs to be a turn for him.
Well, we have a honorable mention section, and we are working our way through that presently.
Okay. So wait. You were hang on a
Stuart,
second.
we are awarding Stuart with 2 stars for being awesome this year.
All right, thank
Oh, that's
you,
right. Oh,
thank
my
you.
mistake. That's right. He is. Yes. Sorry. My mistake. Yes.
That is sorry. We're learning how to MC these things. Um, and thank you, Stuart. Um, and next up we have Midlev Mindire. Gotta get that right. John Hyde, who is out there somewhere. Are you out there, Midlev?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Thank you for showing up. And I would like you, basically, what I would like to hear is the the unsparing report. Give me 2 minutes to explain why we have to be on Gather and not on Turf. And I'm sure that it is not your fault, but that is I'm sure that it is down to some other subsystem. But let's hear it.
Well, uh, it's at least partially my fault, but yeah, not entirely, I don't think. Um, well, we have video calls on Turf, but they have a number of issues. The first issue is before you even get to the video call, it takes a long time to go wherever you're going. So, if you're going to this place to go to the video call there, it takes a long time to get there because for the Urbits to talk to each other and figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it takes a long time. So that's just a networking thing.
What's it doing during long time? It's just basically too much networking without. Is that something that you think directed messaging will help with, or
I certainly hope so. That was
okay?
my
Yeah,
assumption has been that directed messaging will help with that. I think it's both just the routing and establishing the connection and also the loading of data from the turf. And sometimes with a
got
large
it,
turf, there's a lot of data to load. So some of that
got
can be
it.
helped by caching on the client or on the Urbit side, which I'm not doing, which I should do. So that's like partially my fault. Um, but caching doesn't help the first time you go somewhere. Um,
Got it.
Then moving on to actually establishing the calls, it's sometimes difficult to sync up with people because your movements are somewhat delayed. So like you move here and the person's moving there, but they might think they're over here, so they move here, and then you're like chips in the night.
Are there ways that you can mitigate these factors without, while making turf less of a gather clone? Because I'm not sure we actually need all quite those fancy features of gather.
Yeah, we could definitely add a button for calling someone who's in the same turf but isn't right next to you, and that way you wouldn't have to be moving precisely.
Fair,
Um,
fair.
but then that brings us to when you establish a call, it takes a long time, oftentimes a long time to establish the call, and sometimes it takes an extremely long time, and I don't know exactly why that is, but it seems like sometimes the handshake protocol just gets hung up between the Urbits when they're establishing the WebRTC connection, and it can take like 5 minutes for a simple relatively short request to go through.
Mm.
So again, I'm hoping directed messaging will assist with this.
And again,
then the
that's just
WebRTC itself.
because that's because there's actually 5 minutes of Ames conversation that needs to go on, basically to break some GIF or something up into packets. Is that the?
Well, this isn't for sending GIFs. This is literally just saying, these are some servers that we could use for establishing a peer connection. This is my details about my client. This is how many streams I want to send you. And you send that to the other person, and they send you back what they can do. And you do a handshake to establish the WebRTC browser connection. So there's no
Right.
actual media being sent in that process.
So it's
but
not
nevertheless,
clear
it randomly
what's
gets hung up sometimes.
it randomly gets hung up, and it's not entirely clear why you'd need to actually go in and really murder it. Yeah, it would be, it's sort of like, it's just it's always a really nice exercise to dog food things. Is Gather using WebRTC, or is it doing its own thing that cuts through that?
I don't know exactly. I'm like 99% sure Gather has a centralized media server that all of our video feeds are going to, and then it's distributing audio and video back to people who are listening. Whereas a pure peer-to-peer WebRTC setup is each person connects to each other person. So with this many people, it would be a huge amount of connections between everybody, and that's not practical.
Makes sense.
So,
Makes sense. Makes sense.
But I don't know if they're using WebRTC to connect the client to the server, or if they're using WebSockets or something else. But it's not.
Yeah, it
doesn't really matter.
it would be interesting to like it's just an interesting revealed preference that once you have something like Urbit, you seem to want something like Gather. And so, perhaps, sort of making it a more core feature of the system and, pushing it in sort of on a reverse dog fooding basis, like this is what is sort of the motivation for building this, like this is what we use, so we should be here. So actually, like, the you know, all of the things mentioned are like worth doing interesting things about, all the way to the point of thinking about how we can have off-orbit centralized media servers and things like that. So a little bit more external support basically helps you add this feature to Urbit as a system, as a whole, and it seems to be something that's genuinely needed. Yes, exactly, Mothel. And so, I mean, I hate sort of I love Urbit to be self-contained, and I hate making it dependent on external services. But, given that especially those external services maybe can be at the star layer and not at the planet layer, I think, helps a little bit. So, you know, I don't think it's too onerous to say that if you're running a star, which is actually a sponsor, you'd better be running these other servers as well. But, although it just creates more things that can break. But yeah, no, this is, thank you for doing this. People say that you used to have hair, but now you don't have hair. And I'm
It's
curious
going
as to
back
the
a little bit.
rationale. It's going back a little bit. Did you have, it was just a choice, or, it's not a
Well,
religious calling, or?
no, it's not a religious thing. It was part of a disguise. So there was an event for the church youth group where the kids go to the mall and they search for people from the church that they ordinarily would recognize, but they're disguised. So they're like looking at strangers, trying to figure out like, do I know that person? So I shaved off the
That's
top of my
brilliant.
head, and I left the back unshaved, like I was balding. It didn't really look like I was balding. It looked like I just shaved the top of my head. So I went like that, and then afterwards I had to shave the rest of it because it would be
Because
silly.
otherwise you just look too weird, except for a child. That's an amazing and cool effort. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't need to, so I won't. All right. Thank you so much, Midlev.
Yeah,
And
the conversation was about how Turf isn't yet ready for certain things like web calls, but we should emphasize that it's really awesome today, and there's a lot you can do with it. You can build like a whole like customizable 2D map, and there's interactions where you can like program little mini games. So if you guys haven't checked out Turf, it's definitely worth checking out, even though the video calls are a little slow. So.
yeah, you can make like mini puzzles that are all set up with just like drop down menus, to program the behavior. So if you feel like getting into that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. And by the way, that is Jack, although he's sitting in darkness and looks like a creature of the night, really. But he's in his on his face, he's smiling. You just can't see his face. He's doing that to disguise. His name is not actually Jack Wang. It's actually Jack Ma. He's in hiding from the Chinese government, under the name Jack Wang. Um, and all right, let's keep going.
Before we
And
proceed, I'm
Ryan.
happy to say that we will be awarding 2 stars to Midlev for his incredible work on Turf, which
So much.
yeah. And I have a fun Turf anecdote to share, actually. I used Turf, I think maybe in the first week that you had released it. And I had an idea to design my Turf, and what I created was a pentagram with fiery
Oh,
candles.
great.
And in the center of the pentagram, I placed a portal for sorreg-namtyv. I was attempting to summon him into being, and I'm glad to report that it worked.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. I will always. You can try summoning me to other places with a pentagram, but it may or may not work. But we Diblid, we prefer the name, the term Ukrainian Wheel of Freedom around here. Um, all right. Let us move on and praise someone who is not here, probably for Christmas-related reasons, who is Nordis Machweil, who has made a whole bunch of awesome, amazing Urbit explainer videos on YouTube. And this is, propaganda is like nothing is more crucial than propaganda in today's media environment. And but I would roast him in some way, but he's not present, so that's totally fine. Ryan, you may do the honors.
Yeah, we're gonna give him 2 stars for his work there as well.
Amazing, amazing,
Mhm.
amazing, amazing, amazing.
And
All
I'll
right,
drop your YouTube in the chat in case you guys want to check that out.
excellent, 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 excellent. We now move to, is it Kirill or Kirill? I think it's Kirill. I think it's Kirill. I'm going to go with Kirill. Kirill, is it Kirill or Kirill?
It's Korea.
It's Kirill. Damn it. And so much from my knowledge of the crazy world to the east. In any case, I wanted to recognize what Kirill did, which was something that I've long suspected was possible, which is to basically do Wasm in Urbit as a jet. It's possible, but it's sort of like the kind of mismatch with the state, and especially the problem of like I'm going to boot up a Wasm engine, but I actually don't want to have a whole ton of overhead here in like setting up and tearing down this context. I just want to run some simple function and so the problem of basically figuring out how to integrate a high-speed, reasonably deterministic interpreter with Urbit as a jet it's one of these things that's sort of simple in theory and actually quite tricky and challenging in practice. Kirill, how many times did you start over on this project?
Well, I guess um, that's an interesting question. Well, during the hackathon, I guess I started over a couple of times to make the actual Wasm interpreter that is being called by the function that is jetted.
Hmm.
And when implementing the function that is being jetted, so like the top level interpreter, well, I guess I started over once, and it was like a major change. So yeah, I guess like 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times is about right. That's, I think, fairly typical for a mature Urbit subsystem because basically nobody's ever done anything really exactly like this before. And the last time I talked to Kirill, the thing that I talked about, or the project that I spoke, with open longing in my voice about, was the idea that maybe we could execute JavaScript as well. Part of the problem being that the JavaScript for Wasm tools are relatively primitive because everybody is just like, why would I, if I have Wasm, I have a JVM. Except that we don't have a JavaScript VM because we're not a browser, but maybe we should. And so, the ability to learn, in terms of like little snippets of lightweight code that's out there on the internet, JavaScript is definitely a rather big deal. Have you looked at this problem at all, Kirill?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did. And um, just as you said, the problem is that usually when languages are ported in Wasm in order to run them in browsers, and you don't have this problem with JavaScript, you can already run it in the browser. There are some projects, they appear to be a little bit immature, but probably usable for some simple use. Some other languages which are, well, not exactly JavaScript, but for example, TypeScript, you can compile it to Wasm, although you cannot compile the JavaScript itself. There is like a dialect called assembly script, which has basically the same syntax and very similar standard library. And it should be possible to like take a code base in assembly in TypeScript, for example, and like port it to TypeScript to assembly script, sorry, and that should be possible to run in Wasm.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Although probably not as optimal as eventually getting a real integration with a JS VM.
Yeah, and I guess something similar, so basically a similar approach that I did with Wasm, where you essentially make the top level interpreter for state monad. You could probably just like take the definition, like the definition of the JavaScript virtual machine and basically make a backend for that in Hoon and then make the top level caller and also jet it. That's also, I guess, doable. I haven't really looked into like how big the spec is for the JVM. So yeah, but that's probably worth looking into.
Yeah. 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 Maybe we could get some H1Bs to do that. And, no, I think that the prospect of having an Urbit which can execute basically like any language at a reasonably reasonable speed comparable to the or any high level, not a memory oriented language like C, although I suppose you could do something like that. I mean, you can compile C Wasm, of course, but just getting, sort of deterministic execution of deterministic languages at a normal language speed within the Urbit operating system is basically, I think, eliminates a lot of different kinds of critiques of the system. I think especially basically one of the things that you'll see once it becomes possible to run other languages in Urbit world is I think you'll see that people still choose to use Hoon, both not just because it's a superior language, although obviously it is, but also because it sort of has it's the native language of the system, and anything else is sort of not quite in the, So I think we'll basically we will pretty much only use this for legacy code. On the other hand, there's a whole ton of places where pulling in legacy code, such as, the example I was thinking of was doing an Obsidian compatible thing and then using Obsidian plugins, which are in TypeScript. And so, I think huge number of ways to use something like that. So anything else I should bring up, Kirill? Anything you want to use your 15 minutes of fame on here?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you guys can, for examples of using Wasm, I have a repo where I solved a handful of additive code puzzles. I didn't have time to solve all of them, but like I solved around 12, I think, something like that. And so you can check out examples there. And I'm just looking forward for the 2025 to see what I can do with it and for other contributions. So very grateful to be here and thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Kirill. Ryan?
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you here, Kirill, and we want to give you 4 stars for what you've created. I think it's very valuable, and yeah, just thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's move forward to Migrev Dolseg, who is up there, who has. I should mention, by the way, that the one of the standards for these awards is that you basically didn't do the work as a Tlon or UF employee, because we don't want to, it's like all contests do this, right? So, Will, because he's a Red Horizon employee, is slightly, tangential to this, but I'm assured that he did this work on his own, time for his own devious reasons. And this work is, of course, and now I believe you named Sen Hawk before the whole Twa thing happened. Will, that's correct? It's not a reference to her or her coin or anything like that. It was just, obviously it's a timeless thing, and so when she and her work are long forgotten, Sinhawk will remain. But I had a question for you. I haven't looked at the shrubbery model you used in Sandhawk, or the recursive user space model you used in Sandhawk, but just to pull you out, I was talking to Taylor Tolbus about this the other day and sort of pressed him, and he seemed to develop some sort of sickness, that would prevent him from answering my questions, which is fine, and I'll be grilling him again once he gets well. But one of the questions I have, I'm very sort of open-minded as to the exact structures of a recursive user space that we put together. But one of the things I've noted about some of the designs is that they seem to drop or truncate the duct mechanism from veins. And I'm wondering if you have an opinion about that, because I question that. I have questions about that choice.
My opinion is one of pure ignorance. I could not explain what a duct is to you.
Okay. A duct is a duct in a poke. A duct defines the cause of the poke, and it's a stack of paths essentially that say this is why this happened. And it essentially serves the same purpose that, for example, a file descriptor or a socket serves, or a port in mock serves, which is that it basically allows you to disambiguate different conversations from different sources. And so when you basically say, when you have to sort of answer back, for example, you can answer back on the same duct and your thing will get routed that way. And that's how sort of pokes, which are basically forward operations, turn into reversible operations. And so if you basically say, let's say A causes B to talk to C, then the duct that C gets contains, where and who and B, these paths are purely conceptual. They're not correlated with any subcomponents in a vein design. But the path basically because you have that duct, when you get to C, you're like, oh, I heard this thing through B, who heard it from A. So if I send that duct in a response to B, B can then pull the head off that duct and send it back to A. And so you're not doing this thing of sort of keeping what you'll notice in a system without ducts is that state will develop in other ways. And so you'll get these other sort of, almost like synthetic keys in a way that will start to basically play the role of the like very powerful and valuable, and in my opinion, just pure stroke of absolute genius duct mechanism. So that is the case for ducts as presented by me. And if anyone wants to present the case against ducts, um, I'm here, bitch. I don't know. And but I yield. I always yield to reason. So if people have, my like but my sense is that if you try to simplify a thing by removing a feature like that, you'll wind up adding it back at a different level. So that's my opinion. Does that make sense?
way I've avoided doing anything like that so far is that there's really no official concept of an effect that you can emit from your backend code
Mm.
block. You like all of your poke.
It's all state updates basically.
Right, it all happens in a single layer. If you want to update multiple spots in your tree at the same time, you encode that all as one command, and then that's the final thing. There's not really a recursiveness on that layer. So it's limited in that
Got it.
way, but it greatly simplifies like the command interface that you can give from the front end.
Sorry. Fair. I mean, I think that Tiller also has a system which is defined more in terms of state updates than kind of forward effects. And in a way, the duct system is kind of a lower level system and more general in the patterns of interaction that it allows, but sometimes generality is not actually a benefit. Oh, wait, the Tiller himself is going to weigh in on this subject.
Well, okay, so I never actually got far enough into implementing Fey to determine whether or not it needs ducts. I just kind of designed it in the first place without it, thinking it probably wouldn't. But just to briefly encapsulate where, I and others who've criticized like the depth first move ordering discipline are coming
Ooh.
from, and keep in mind, Curtis, I am actually sort of on your side in this. I like the idea of depth first move ordering.
People always say that when they're trying to sandbag you, but no, I believe that
No,
basically both
where
depth first and asynchronous have a real place to play. I don't think
right.
that there's any use in guaranteeing a breadth first search order. I don't think anything could really benefit from that guarantee. Maybe I'm wrong,
Sure.
but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And Fey is a recursive user space that would, when crossing the tree, so not going to a child, it would use an asynchronous message rather than a breadth first message, and depth first would be guaranteed for going down the tree. Just to
Yeah,
point out,
I've
like
seen
for
that
anybody
design, and I think it's good. Go on.
for anybody who would like to just explore kind of call stack disciplines and do systems programming in Urbit, which you can totally still do in Gall, all I want to point out there is that this idea of breadth or depth first move ordering that we're supposed to have it should be such that if you have an agent and its job is to send two messages in the same event, depth first move ordering should guarantee you that the first message will terminate before the second one is sent.
Mhm.
As of right now in Gull, because Gull doesn't know when you're sending a message to another agent, whether that agent is on another computer or not, it must receive an acknowledgement before that message terminates. So in effect, you never actually get the benefit of that. You're always waiting for the acknowledgement before the effect is terminated. And so in practice, like people writing their agents, they don't get to send cards to Arvo as if it's just a function call. it's still an asynchronous event. And in those cases, it actually is easier to debug those kinds of like problems with those kinds of interfaces in a breadth first move order. So
Yeah,
I think that
you
points to
need to
something deeper. I
define.
don't think that points to like needing breadth first, but like, yeah, that is the current state of the art and why.
Those are two different kinds of causality, I guess, in a way. And like the semantics of causing a thing where you're like, this thing must complete before I complete is in a call stack like way, and saying, I need this thing to happen at some point, are like you're saying different things to the system there. And I think we can agree on that. Um,
Right.
and all right, going back to Hawk, this is obviously in sort of the best, the kind of the spirit of Urbit is basically you kind of sit in your basement and come up with something with like this sort of crazy yet fully formed world. That's really what we all came here to do. And as for sort of the ways, like, I feel like there's been a lot of different experiments in a recursive user space, which was something that I kind of originally proposed as I was leaving in 2018. And people have done, it's a deep and interesting space. People have done a lot of cool stuff in there. It's clearly one of these things that, as I was saying with Kirill, the needs to be just restarted 3 or 4 times, just like thought about. It feels like the next thing to do with some of these spaces, as I was with the recursive user space problem, as I was alluding to earlier, is basically it's time to kind of develop an application which is not really a toy, which is meant to be used in anger, that sits on these tools so that you sort of feel the full pressure of reality. And then, under that sort of full pressure of reality, then you uh, you're going to learn some things that are going to basically take your thing from like a cool research project toy into like the shit that people will actually use. What's really clear about sort of recursive user spaces in general is that, like, they're clearly necessary in a way to kind of implement the full promise of Urbit in a way that users can really feel. The monolithic apps still feel a lot like you're talking to a Unix process in a way. And like actually there's an interesting relationship of especially a recursive user space to the seemingly unrelated problem of how people use Urbit on a phone, because there are essentially two ways to use a system like Urbit on a phone, to oversimplify broadly, the Talon way and the Urbit Foundation way, and both of them are entirely valid. The Talon way is to basically say, okay, here we have a personal server, which is a thing very foreign to the Apple ecosystem. And here we have a phone in your hand. Let's do things on your phone that work the way your phone expects to work, right? Under this structure, if you have one Urbit and you've installed 6 Gall apps, it is actually really proper for you to install 6 separate iOS apps, each of which is a normal iOS app that basically talks to some kind of backend on your Urbit. And that is the natural thing to do from an iOS perspective. It is also, strangely enough, the natural thing to do from an Urbit perspective now, because Gall wants you to write basically monolithic apps. And the thing is that once we have a recursive user space, especially, once sort of the interesting, I think some of the most interesting stuff that's been done with recursive user space is just kind of interesting build stuff that corresponds to component configuration. You know, once you have a recursive user space working and working properly, you start to get an impedance mismatch there between the iOS apps and your sort of smoothly generalized Urbit, because basically within those iOS apps, there's still clear boundaries between single function applications. Whereas within the context of a recursive user space, these things are actually much more smooth. And so, yes, of course, Tiller is saying in the chat, they are different Urbit browsers, but they're like locked, they're customized, they're not just different instances of the same thing. They should actually feel like native iOS apps that just happen to use the same server on the back end. And that state of there's an impedance mismatch between your iOS phone and your Urbit backend will, of course, continue for quite some time, and it will be resolved in only one way, which is that eventually your phone will run Urbit. It will be an Urbit phone. We're going to bring this out. We're launching this in March. I'm just kidding. It will take a while for there to be an Urbit phone, but I personally have a background in handset software, so as we used to call it. Does anyone still say handset? So I would love to see an Urbit phone. I think it would be very cool to have like Knock and Hoon actually directly driving the display. So your display on your phone is actually a function of a noun, in flash memory in your hand, something like that. Not going to happen anytime soon, but until then, and that's a long time, you have this very constructive, creative, impedance mismatch that needs to be dealt with, and dealt with in a cool way. Now, another feature of Hawk, of course, is that it renders through XML. There's basically a sort of render to XML and then render the XML kind of phase. Again, this reminds us of all the cool stuff I'd love to do anyway with basically native Urbit rendering, because what I'm really into is rendering to SVG and doing interesting kind of 2D effects and cool 2D stuff with that, and maybe even 3D. I don't know, but 3D is just a special case of 2D as far as I'm concerned. I was a 2D man. Um, and yeah, all of these things are like, I think they're just pieces of that new user space puzzle. I admit that I've been focused more over the past few months, or I regret that I've been more focused over the past few months than on the kind of the details of this, and more on, finding the money to actually do it, where we continue to be making good progress, I feel, on the corporate structure issues. And I'm really looking forward to like diving back into the material, because I feel like people have done really a lot of extremely useful exploration in this space, and like really just added a lot creatively, and yet it's still the area that kind of has the most to add creatively. And in a way, it's like the recursive user space is sort of, in a way, it's kind of the culmination of the Urbit vision. And so, which I kind of knew with Gall. I mean, Gall is just like, oh my God, I fucking finished this thing, right? And so, I think it's good that that got delayed until it was sort of ready to congeal in this in really its proper form. But I think it'll be very, very cool, like, once it's there. And obviously there are already several competing frameworks, so we just need to take the engineers who produce these frameworks and put them in a room. And it's like the scene in The Shield where they lock the two gang leaders in, and weld them into a shipping container. And I think that's how we're gonna decide whose version of recursive user space is implemented, and then I'll fight the winner. And All right. And Jack has posted the link to Migrev's Urbit, and I really want all Urbit links to go through, or at least redirect through urbit.org. But I never want to see, like, as an Urbit user, I never want to see the details of even my own hosting arrangement. I want hosting to be like more invisible than it is. But that's a separate conversation. All right, Ryan, we'll turn it over to you, for the award. I feel like you should have like gold, something representing stars, maybe even just those gold wrapped like chocolate coins, but yeah, I think it's like, it's all very cool stuff, and I haven't gone really quite deep enough into it to basically be like, I like this or I don't like that. And I like ducks, what can I say? But I also recognize that, essentially, if you compare these sort of update oriented models to the action or move oriented models, the thing I was really primarily concerned about in veins is like, is this fully general? And so really being confident about that, you can take a little bit of a step back from that at the user space level and basically say, no, this is basically fully general, but we actually want to impose this pattern on everything. We feel like this higher level pattern makes more sense, and constraining people to use it will tighten things up in general. That's often the kind of trade-off you see in these kinds of designs. All right, Ryan, I interrupted you. That was bad. I shouldn't have done that.
Will, before we send you into the shipping container and weld you in with the other the other Los Alamos like figures, we would like to award you with 4 stars. I recognize your passion. I think we're lucky to have you here in our community, and yeah, thank you. I think your work is incredible.
And whoever wins the shipping container fight gets all the others stars. That's important, right? So I hope you've worked on your Muay Thai. I love it. All right. And now we are going to move on to not necessarily our best contributor, but certainly not even our first contributor, but merely our oldest contributor. And Jack, what year were you born? You look older than me, and that's pretty old.
Yeah, I am. I think I got about 10 years on you.
Mm,
So, yep, I was born in 58.
wow. That's fairly solid, and I love how you're overestimating my age there. It's great that you remember the '60s, but I remember the '70s. I should point out that I actually saw Star Wars in the theater when it came out. What was the first movie that you remember seeing in the theater, like Gunsmoke or something, or that
No, the
was a
first
TV show?
movie I remember seeing was my folks took me to the drive-in to see Pinocchio, and I fell
Wow.
asleep during it. I was probably like 4.
They animated Pinocchio.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Are there still drive-ins anywhere? That was the thing. Does anyone need
No,
need
I
drive-ins?
don't know of any in California anyway. There were a couple that lasted quite a long time. One was along Highway 101, and the other was along Highway 80, and they both, I think, were porn drive-ins at the end.
Mm,
No, I know the
I
one
love the
near Petaluma was.
I like the idea of the porn drive-in somehow. It's just like it sort of combines like early 20th century and late 20th century, like in the same, kind of weird context. Uh,
So I
but
do remember high school hijinks in the 70s of, sneaking extra people into the drive-in, and yeah, drive-ins were
mhm,
basically party pits, is where you went to drink beer and other
yeah,
other substances, and
which you were just learning about in the early 70s. I mean, this is really like dazed and confused era, because like to be, in I remember the 70s, but I was not in high school in the 70s. Like that was peak something.
It was peak something, and I was in the class of 76, which was peak several things. I think not all of them
Well,
good.
someone suggests Quaaludes, right? And this is just like Quaaludes are like one of those things where, it's like my dad said, we don't even know how to make those now. um, the
Just
I'm
like getting to
sure.
the moon, huh? We don't know how to do it anymore.
Yeah. We've lost. Exactly. We can't get to the moon, and we can't take Quaaludes, and we definitely, can't take Quaaludes on the moon, which was, I think, the point of Apollo 17 or something like that, right? Okay, yeah. So time passes, and when did you first learn about the relational model, Jack? Now, because you're not as old as Dayton Cod, both of whom have four-letter names, by the way, which really need to be reused in the Urbit context.
Oh, that's actually a
Um,
good idea. Yeah.
mhm.
Maybe for a
That's Cod
vein.
with two D's, and CJ Date, was it CJ Date?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and what was Cod's first name?
Uh, I don't remember.
Don't know. I just think it
Edgar,
was
or something like
Cod.
that. Yeah. Cod.
Something like some Cod, the god of databases. So
Yeah.
explain, like, of course, number one, I always thought that Urbit, would need some relational intelligence at some point. On the other hand, a map is basically a relational database in a sense. It requires you to basically define your row as the pair of primary key. And what do you call the rest of the row that's not the primary key?
The rest of the row that's not the primary key. That's what I call
Got
it.
it. Got it. I thought there was a
Yeah,
better term
I don't
there,
think
but
it has. I
it
don't think it
seems not.
has a name, a proper name. Somebody could
But
correct me on that.
yeah. Well, of course. So they're relatively similar to each other, and the kind of question I had, which made me sort of think harder about whether to go down the relational rat hole or rabbit hole or something hole, was the question of, do you want your relational tables to be maps, or don't you want them to be maps? And basically, in terms of thinking about, okay, I'm going to force people to structure their rows as as the ordered pair of primary key, rest of the stuff that's not the primary key. Or whether I'm going to basically really do things in the completely SQL compatible way, seem to me a way in an open question. I'm curious. Of course, we have this vast arsenal of SQL compatible things which it's wise to reuse. I'm curious how you feel about saying, what if we did SQL-like things, but we just made sure all our tables had to be maps? What direction would that have gone in, Mr. Fox?
Uh, well, actually, Obelisk uses maps pretty regularly, and also ordered maps, which
Mm,
ordered maps are very good because you can work with partial keys, which is pretty important for
right. That
implementing
is,
relational stuff. So,
that
in a
makes sense.
sense, I mean, it's more complicated than this, but you could think of Obelisk as just a hierarchy of maps. So you got a map of databases, then within a database you got a map of tables and views, and then a map
Hmm.
of the definition of the table, all kind of
Right,
turtles all the way
right.
down sort of thing.
Turtles all the way down. So your tables actually are maps, or are they not maps?
Uh, Combination of maps and ordered maps. So I haven't fully exploited ordered maps yet. And currently, actually, a lot of stuff is lists
Hmm.
for reasons. So there's still a lot of sorting out to do It's currently in an alpha state, and I want to get out one more alpha soon here because
How many times how many times did you start over on Obelisk?
didn't really start over so much as, you get a certain amount of functionality working, and then you realize you need to rewrite the last thing you did in order to implement the next thing you want to do, and that's just continuous.
Yes.
So I'm kind of at the end of rewriting some stuff now because getting at least one kind of simple join working for subassembly was a bit of a stretch goal. So I've been backfilling, basically.
Got it.
Now, yeah.
But it's still a very and you haven't thought particularly about you're still you haven't written any custom jets for Obelisk. You haven't thought too
No.
hard about, but that's clearly envisioned in the design, I imagine. Like various kinds of jetting.
Yeah, I think it needs to be sorted out exactly where jets need to be placed, because it does reuse a lot of core library stuff in Hoon already. So there is a certain amount of that. So I have reasonable confidence that tables up to the low tens of thousands of rows should perform pretty well for the most part with joins and everything else, which is, I think, reasonable for a personal server. I don't think, personal servers are going to have million row tables.
Sure.
Although you never know.
It's not like you're running the Holocaust on your personal server, right? And sorry. I just yeah. I mean that's kind of that's just a scaling metric, right? But
right. So let me let me shill for my my discussion group. So I just put in the link there. It's a real discussion group because I finally got an icon and a header image going. So I hope all the people who have subscribed to the group will maybe start posting to it. I'm especially looking forward to feedback on the roadmap. So I've got a roadmap document out there, which is really just a list of features that haven't been implemented yet. So after I get the first beta going, which the beta will also include software distribution. Right now you need to manually install the desk. So once software distribution is going and the full range of CRUD is available, it opens it up to a lot of new functionality and what should that next functionality be. And I'll also shout out to Will, who did a great job making an Obelisk UI template in Hawk, which is quite serviceable. It'll be
for rendering your database into XML and then subsequently on your screen.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It's a lot like SQL Studio applications. There are several of those floating around. They're all kind of the same. Really, you got a left-hand area where you can view all your databases, and you can select one, and you can enter queries and scripts and run them. Yeah.
Nifty. Yeah, going back, not to roast Will again, but I realized I was, you always have these moments where you're just like, damn, I'm old, and one of those moments was when I realized that Will had never heard of XSLT. Do you remember XSLT?
Yeah. So that had the weird path.
XSLT was
right?
probably the most over-designed thing ever to exist. It was the competitor to CSS. CSS, of course, prevailed and is still used, today. And CSS was sort of very specific, whereas the idea of XSLT was it was sort of inspired by the bizarre over design of PostScript, I think, in some ways, where actually it was sort of revealed, I think, in a dream, maybe some kind of benzene dream, to the designers of XSLT, that actually a style sheet had to be a Turing complete language, but a purely functional Turing complete language, but in XML.
No, you're
And
close. Actually, the most over-designed thing was I forget what it was called. Microsoft came out with this thing to basically make data pipelines, and the language was
link was
Excel.
this link with a
No, it
Q?
was no,
I could
no,
swear you're
no.
describing link with a Q. No, that's
It was something else that was supposed to be able to like import data in your database, and the language of the thing was actually XSLT. So you had
got it.
these XSLTs, there were nested XML and XSLT that were humongous, and there was
Yeah.
like no way, there was no way you could maintain these things. It was ridiculous.
You'd have to be like have like 10 years of XSLT on your resume, which was like, yeah, I mean, there was definitely like, there was something compelling about that infrastructure. You know what it was? The whole world of like XML, not to, obviously we have people from many, many backgrounds here, but it was very European. There's this sort of style in like European computer science that makes you almost think of like library and information science. The XML people got really, really deep down this whole. Will also did not know what a DTD is, which also was like, what a relief, right? And I'm very glad to exist in a world where people have actually forgotten what a DTD is. Maybe next they'll forget what quaaludes are, and yeah, so it's inspiring to see
Yeah, in the early
that
aughts,
conversion.
there was a big push to use XML as a programming language, which was
Yeah.
just horrendous. But back to the relational model. Yeah, I first got exposed to it, I think, in 1988, probably. So
Yeah.
I worked for a
And you've
company that
had
actually.
you've had antibodies in your system ever since. A lot of us were getting exposed to a lot of things in 1988. But go on.
Yeah, I actually had an office, and my office was right across from the data administrators, and they were administrating a database called IMS, which everyone has forgotten about. And at the
I don't
time,
know IMS.
yeah, it was pointers all the way down. So
Ooh,
it
a
was
graph database. A graph database.
pretty
Was it a
kind of,
graph
sort
database?
of,
Ooh,
yeah.
that's the worst kind of database. But go on,
Yeah,
go
but
on,
it,
go on.
it worked, and it was what IBM was pushing at the time. And they were just coming
Hmm.
out with DB2, and the admins were all like, "No way are we implementing this. It'll be too slow, blah blah blah." And yeah, it took a while, but the next company I worked for was actually using DB2. So I started
Hmm.
learning it probably around 1989 or 90.
I think
And
a lot of people like my age and younger are really turned off by just all of the capital letters that are used in SQL. I like never like the way that always I just saw like the all caps as like a boomer thing. But of course you're something of a boomer yourself.
I
So
am
maybe
totally a
you're comfortable
boomer.
with that. Maybe you're
Yeah,
comfortable with
well,
that, right?
the all caps should be reserved only for keywords
Hmm.
and for possibly for aliases. So aliases can be mixed case, but
Hmm.
keywords can theoretically also be mixed case. But the idea is for production code, you capitalize your keywords, and it makes the thing more readable.
I guess it's sort of like the convention of capitalizing the names of movies and like production related documents. They jump out at you a little bit. Of
Yeah.
course, in your day, I mean, I think as far as I'm aware, lowercase they didn't have lowercase until like 1967 or so. It's a relatively late invention, and
Oh,
we,
yeah. So now we're talking about the actual objects or the data.
yeah,
Yeah, the
pre
actual
ASCII.
text data.
Pre-ASCII
Yeah,
representation. So if you worked in early IBM machines, was that EBCDIC? Was that, how do you say that? Was that pre-ASCII?
Yeah.
EBCDIC. That was pre-ASCII, actually. This
Yeah. Funny
motherfucker's so
thing is,
old,
I
he
never
predates
learned.
ASCII.
So I'll date myself and also tell you how stupid I am. You know, I had everything I needed to know about EBCDIC memorized, and then once I switched to ASCII, which was a transition during the 90s, I never really memorized the ASCII codes, so I regularly have to look them up.
So what's capital A in EBCDIC?
Oh, hell if I know. I've long since forgotten that. I think it might have been something like C1, but I could be wrong.
Got it. Jack is making weird expressions with his hands. Yeah. I really, when I think about it, I realize that I probably, if I really wanted to be perverse, probably instead of basing Urbit on ASCII, I should have based it on EBCDIC. That would have really, the Booleans, the Lubians, strong choice. But if I really wanted no one to use the system, it should have used EBCDIC. But I was like, using ASCII is going to totally blow it for my pretense that this isn't some kind of alien computing system, but I'm going to use it anyway. But yeah, having a really solid, handles tens of thousands of records, can do interesting queries and so forth system in there is really good. And sort of once that stabilizes, you basically start to be able to jet it and start to get actually reasonable performance out of your personal server, which hopefully is, as we mentioned earlier, is handling only personal size tasks. It is a personal server after all. And I always felt that basically lacking a database was a significant flaw in the system. Of course, once we start to get databases in the system, that starts to have really interesting interactions with another completely unsolved problem in Urbit. I would say that there are basically two relatively large unsolved system software problems in Urbit. One of them is recursive user space, and the other is full revision control or generalized revision control, because as soon as you have a genuinely typed system, of course, you become unsatisfied with revision control systems that are specific to text files and things like text files. You really want to have revision control on your database, on your everything else, and you want these things to drop out of your model for free. You don't want to basically, just because you have some kind of new kind of data structure like a relational database, which you just invented. You don't want to have to reinvent the whole concept of revision control and so forth. You really want to generalize that. Unfortunately, when you look at revision control systems in the wild, they tend to be, sort of specialized in one direction or another, and it's hard to find kind of real examples. For example, it's very easy for a very ignorant user to look at revision control as in GitHub and collaborative editing as in Google Docs and to say these are basically the same thing. Well, they are basically the same thing, but there's a lot of detail in that word basically. So maybe we could hear your perspective on that a little bit, Namrag, as it relates to databases and other things.
Well, one of the things I did with Obelisk is make it time traveling. So that
Mm-hmm.
is essentially revision control of both your data and your database schema.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's pretty cool. And
I do think it's pretty cool, but what happens when you start to generalize that into something on the scale of clay and you say, okay, I need something that solves problems like this, but it's like sort of the same thing as like solving the GitHub problem.
yeah, I think I'm a bit removed from that But Will,
Hmm.
I believe, has done some really interesting stuff along those lines because I know he's not using GitHub anymore.
Right,
He
right.
does his revision control entirely inside Urbit. So yeah, he's probably the best guy to talk to about that.
Do you have any strong opinions, Migrev, on the subject?
Not when it goes beyond text. I haven't put that much thought into it.
Yeah. See, you just quickly drive off road and you're in this totally unthought about wasteland. And yet it's something that's clearly core, for example, to the concept of recursive user space. And you'll basically say, oh, you should be able to do that. And then, the answer will always be like, well, you can basically do this, or it's essentially this. And I'm like, when I hear a word like essentially or basically, I'm like, okay, we're fucked.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a lot. It means there's a lot of work involved.
there's a lot of work involved, and the lot of work will require a lot of money, and it's my duty to just recognize that we're fucked and then go out and raise it from VCs and never use the phrase we're fucked. And because actually it just means we have hard problems, and I love hard problems, and hard problems are why something like this exists. um all right. I think there's only one issue to cover here, one more issue to cover here, Namrag, and that's the issue of coding conventions and coding standards. Do you feel that the coding conventions of Hoon can be improved, and that the code quality of especially Arvo can be improved?
Um, yes, but I think there's some blockers there that'll make it kind of difficult. One of the things that I dislike about the current standard library, insofar as it is even a standard library, is it doesn't have enough emphasis on true primitives. Like some
Mm,
primitives are kind of all bundled together, and
hmm.
so for instance, I ran into this, and I think it was a philosophy thing, and just my philosophy was diametrically opposed to the
To mine.
philosophy, yeah, or to somebody's. So, for instance, all the so the CRUD functions on a map, for instance, you've got insert,
Mm-hmm.
update, and delete and read. Um, they tend to all be bundled into one monolithic Hoon arm
Hmm.
instead of having a separate Hoon arm for update,
A
a
separate
separate.
core, you mean? Like,
I can't remember if they're cores. I
yeah,
think they were arms, really.
yeah, it's
But
a
they
it's a
all access
core
the
with a,
same
yeah, yeah,
port,
yeah,
right? It's one
yeah.
core. Yeah, exactly. And it makes it hard to understand exactly what is going on when you've got this monolithic thing. Okay, so what happens when you do an update? Oh, well, it takes this path through it. And what happens when you do a delete? It takes
Mm,
this path through it, rather than just having standalones.
standalone functions. Yeah, I really like generalizing, essentially seeing a gate as a special case of a core is basically one of the things that is done differently about sort of Hoon than conventional functional languages. Jack, I think you're just too old to think in this new way, and that's just how it's going to be. But
No,
age
actually,
grants you
it does catch on with me quite a bit. So I discovered, for instance, that Obelisk itself is actually a core.
a core, as I would
Yeah.
expect, and
So it's
and
taken a couple years, but it is getting beat into me, the ideology of dealing with subjects and cores, and I think it is actually uh, quite revolutionary and for the better.
I prefer to think of it as a return to an older, simpler time, but I'm not sure if that time ever existed. But but if it was a return to an older, simpler time, that would, of course, be ideal. Now, I've roasted you a bunch for your age, but there's one thing that age grants, and that, of course, is wisdom. And, I think, a large part of the wisdom you have to add to the world, and of course, it's a piece of wisdom that appears in all of your source files. And I wanted to get, we've talked frankly here about a number of sensitive issues such as the Holocaust, but like I'd like to hear your views on Satan.
On Satan.
On Satan.
I think, wow. Okay, so we're going to get metaphysical here.
We're
So
going to get
okay.
metaphysical, specifically as it relates to Hoon and computer science, especially because I think that there is a kind of deep relationship here. Like I think it's important, when you're creating anything, certainly as sort of as intricate as like a delicate, cathedral, like an operating system, you really should. You have to see yourself as both sort of serving God in a sense, where God is sort of the revealed, it's sort of you feel that you're not creating something yourself, but you're discovering something that was there in some very mysterious sense before you found it. Like that's sort of when I started thinking about gates and cores, I was like, okay, yeah, this was actually the way it was supposed to work, but it just doesn't work this way. And then, when I think of Satan, I think of the opposite. I think of the sort of the forces of disorder. Satan to me is like inherently a chaotic force. I think that if you basically, to get really metaphysical, one way of thinking of these questions is whether is the difference between the first and the second D&D alignment system, because as you may recall, the original D&D had only 3 alignments. It had lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And then they developed this 2-dimensional alignment system, which as a teenager attracted me very much. And so there's good, evil, and law versus chaos and good versus evil are separate axes. Right. And so everybody, of course, when they start playing D&D wants to be chaotic good. And like my feeling, having, spent half a century on this earth, which is not quite as long as you, my feeling is that that's really a huge trap. And if there's really only one thing that I've learned in my life, is that there's actually no such thing as chaotic good. Can you comment on that with your greater perspective from 1958?
Yeah, I mostly agree with that perspective. I think, in a sense, Satan is like the dual of Christ, in that Christ represents what is good in humanity, and there's a portion that exists within you and a portion that exists in the wider world, and they're connected. And Satan is kind of the dual of that, in that there is a portion that exists within you and a portion that exists in the outer world, and it's also connected. And but the satanic thing is, yeah, chaos, but also animal instinct. So it's it's the urges that you just reflexively do without thinking about it, whereas the Christ principle is more intellectual and spiritual and good. So that's what belongs in code and computer systems, and not the reflexive animalistic evil impulses and chaos. So yeah, Satan should be banned from code.
Satan should be banned from code. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ryan, to finish our words festival here.
Wow, what a great note. I'll be thinking about that for the next few days. Jack, I have a lot of personal experience working with relational databases in my past work, and in reading the documentation, it's very apparent to me that you've thought very deeply about this problem for a very long time, and I think that there's something very much aligned with the Urbit ethic of having the courage to take on really difficult problems, thinking about the evolutionary path that something like relational schemas, database design, and so on has been on, and recognizing like some of these things we don't have to take all of this for granted. Some of these are just warts or accidents, and we can do this. There's a better way to do this. On behalf of the Urbit Foundation, I want to award you with 8 stars for your work. I think it's incredible. I think it's one of the most impressive things I've seen in my 4 years, almost 5 years being here. Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm happy that you're here.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that you recognized. I'm trying to do an improved version of SQL, not a clone, but a better, taking the good stuff and making it better. So thanks for the recognition.
One of the most important satanic influences or urges is simply laziness. And like to say that, oh, this thing from the 1960s is good enough no, SQL is not from the 1960s. It just uses capital letters as if it was from the 1960s. And, so obviously your new sequel will have to be lowercase, but anyway, great.
You can still write it in lowercase. You can still do everything in lowercase if you want.
Yeah. I want to raise, since we're not recording the comments for some reason, I want to just promote Tiller's comment that quote, good enough is a satanic incantation. And I really believe that to be true. All right, back to you, Ryan. You have some honorable mentions that you want to go over, I believe.
Yeah, let's.
Or are you still working on those?
No, we have list. Neil, I don't believe Neil is present. Is that right? I haven't noticed. We would like to. Oh, is Neil here?
I showed up.
Hey, Neil.
Howdy, Ryan.
Hey, we would like to mention you in an honorable manner, because your work in producing educational material for developers, I think, has just been as the standard at which you've delivered that materials is very high. I am very grateful that it exists, and yeah, I think you really embody much of the values of Urbit, and yeah,
Yeah.
one of many people that I'm very glad are here.
What other shitcoin has its own technical journal?
Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Neil. And the market will have to figure that one out. But yeah, we know we're real, and it's an honor. It's just an honor that people have contributed so much to this little thing I started working on in my basement in 2002. It's much bigger than me now, and I'm very happy about that.
Next, we would like to mention and honor Wizpam Wantex, who, scanning the environment, perhaps is not here today. But yeah, from what I've seen, like I really, what I really appreciate about him and what I want to highlight is his first principles thinking. He is very willing to take a sort of contrarian take and to oppose some of the, sometimes I observe that we can have a bit of groupthink. And he's someone who does not fall prey to any kind of groupthink. He's a very independent mind, and I would like to honor him for that. Jack, would you like to do one?
Yeah. I think that we obviously, should be honoring Piri, Jose, and Joe Master Morzad for just like powering through, really like Urbit development and the urban network staying up and being alive is resting on the shoulders of these guys, and we just really appreciate them for that, especially in these last couple months. Gary, for just being like a stabilizing voice in the ecosystem, and for being and just for caring so much.
I think it says something remarkable about our ecosystem, quite frankly, that Gary could be a stabilizing voice in it. But I'll take what I can get. No. I mean, it's like basically, people. I think there's a lot of people, and I'm not naming any names, that basically like, you know, don't want Urbit to be insane. And I think that basically, like, the fundamental realization that Urbit is insane, has always been insane, and will always be insane, and the rest of the world will just have to join us here in the schizo future is like really like, you know, um, super important, and it's just like, yeah, it's a yin yang thing. It's like basically just when you think we're completely crazy, you see how down to earth we are, and just when you think we're down to earth, you see how completely crazy we are. And I feel like this is really the vibe of, this new century, which is still pretty young. And I think you'll be hearing more about Urbit from it in the coming years. I hope, personally, I would like my reputation to be, as a computer scientist rather than as an advocate for slavery or whatever people are saying these days. And, so exactly, yeah, we're going to be well-adjusted schizos, and just you wait for the insane media shit that we're going to make happen. So thank you, Gary. You know, and exactly. See, everything is relative. And all right, Jack or Ryan, more.
Yeah. Ryan, do you want to
Sure.
go?
Let's go with Glueware. Man, Glueware, when you posted that video
Wait.
back
What's
in
this? You're
oh
using his slave name. They don't use the slave name. What's
oh
his?
yes yeah
He's got to
that's
stop.
Disden
what is
Alves.
Disden?
Okay, Distant. Thank you.
I would like to recognize Disden in particular for the video that he published. This must have been in August or perhaps September. It was the Hitler meme format video. I watched that with Will Ball and just laughed my face off. Um, yeah, the content that this guy produces for us is just hilarious and
Hang
so
on
on
one
brand.
second.
I love it.
One second. I gotta do it. Gotta do it. Give me a moment. Um, uh,
Brace yourselves for
one
the
sec.
reenactment.
One sec. China! Sorry. Yodel! Krebs! Sorry. Anyway, brilliant work. And as we enter into a progressively seemingly more schizo future, it's like when you go back to Jack mentioned that he was introduced to the relational, database model in 1988. And when I sort of put my mind back into like the 1988, world, I guess there were two things that happened, to me in 1988, which is that I graduated from high school, and my wife was born. And, so when I think back to the late 80s, sorry, Will, when I think back to the last, I was 89 actually. When I think back to the late 80s, and I just remember this world of like three, there were content, basically visual content was either the movies or there were three sources of visual content. There were ABC, NBC, CBS for the pros, and then for the elites, there was PBS, NPR, right? And Pacifica if you were really cool, right? And everything was so serious, right? You looked at like elections and they were like these serious things. And if you told people that back then that Donald Trump, who was essentially Biff from Back to the Future 2, would be elected president not once but twice, arguably three times, you would have people just would have just stared at you uncomprehendingly as if the future was completely insane. In fact, what was I watching? I was just watching Demolition Man, one of the most prescient movies of the 80s. And in Demolition Man really captures the future quite nicely because it's in 2032 and they refer to President Schwarzenegger. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time was a bodybuilder who'd become an actor. Later, he would become governor of California. And the and, and so and that was sort of a sign of these kind of reality flows breaking and the world becoming kind of schizo. At the time, of course, we thought we were, it was a completely serious gesture to elect Arnold as governor of California. And then once he became governor of California, he realized that it was totally a joke, and he would just ride around in his Hummer and smoke fat cigars and let the same people run the place that had always been running the place. Um, and the level of schizo has gotten so great. Even when we compare the Trump election of 2024 to the Trump election of like 2016, like the schizo mindset has sort of so deeply, like everyone knows it's actually substantively in terms of what's happening down at Mar-a-Lago. I've not been to Mar-a-Lago, by the way. Substantively, in terms of what's happening in Mar-a-Lago, it's like 10 times as real as like anything that was happening in 2016. It's also still 2 orders of magnitude away from actually being real. And like, people 3 seashells. Oh my God. The someday we're gonna figure out what you do with the 3 seashells. But we live in that future today. It's completely schizo. I mean, even it's like, is it 20 years since Idiocracy came out? It's almost like that, right? And just the insanity of the present has like just gathered for like to the point where people don't even notice it. And I think that actually, if people from the 80s were somehow teleported into now, they would be less astounded by the sort of the President Trumpness of it all, but like people just think of it as normal. They're just, oh yeah, it's just completely normal that Donald Trump is president. No, it's not in any way normal. I feel that sort of Urbit becoming part of this, future, which is completely insane, is yeah, I think it will only intensify and will only get more schizo. And we're gonna ride that schizo shit into the future, and we're gonna need extremely dank memes. And now Urbit is a completely non-political project, and JD Vance does not yet lurk on Urbit, although I wouldn't rule it out. And Yeah. I think things are gonna get even more crazy, and not in a bad way. Hopefully we won't have any more pandemics. Ryan, Jack, are we done yet, or should we keep moving forward?
Yeah, we want to shout out Kenny for coming in clutch with the Urbit.eth and also organizing the
Amazing.
assembly. And also
Amazing.
shout out Nick Simmons, Simfer Ritwed as well for also helping out with subassembly. Thanks for making us have an awesome event this year.
Nick is great. I see him often in real life. Seems very mercurial, has a strange expression on his face. He seems like you know, he looks like someone who's been in the French Foreign Legion but won't tell you about it. It's a good vibe there. Um, and All right, let's move forward. I will take the agenda item. My goal is, yes, to get Barron Trump on Urbit. I think that's a stretch goal. It's doable. I'm not sure of advance, but I think we can get Barron. I don't know Barron, but I know people who know Barron, so I'll be attempting to reach out.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, shout out to Justin Murphy for helping us with comms, doing an awesome job with the wartime addresses.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, 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 very much appreciated. And the Justin has done an amazing job being, sort of seeing the potential of the system and believing it and evangelizing it and being, it's a thankless job to be an early adopter in some ways. And but yeah, we're here for the long run, and we're here to make it. It's like when I think about, interacting with like early Bitcoin or Ethereum people, it just seemed like I remember going to like an Ethereum meetup in like a room in Palo Alto somewhere in like 2015, 16, something like that. And I was just like, wow, this is a room of just like loser nerds. I love it, because it just did not have the air of people who were gonna like 10,000x their investments, but it happens. And you know, I should note on the subject, I can't really comment on markets, but up until a couple of years ago, it's actually remarkable how evenly Urbit kept pace with Bitcoin. Because when I first started selling Urbit Galaxies to my friends, I was selling them for about 30 Bitcoin, which was like a couple grand at the time. And then I sold the Bitcoin and used it to buy baby food. So um the for which my children will never forgive me, but the yeah, okay, sorry, end of non sequitur. Jack and Ryan, anything more,
Yeah,
and we continue.
last but not least, I want to give a shout out to everyone who has stuck through with us through this entire shake-up process. We are moving back towards stability and financial health. And yeah, it's made it very clear who's here because they really love this thing and because they're very committed to seeing it through no matter what. Shout out to the entire Urbit Foundation team: Trent, Evan, Yoon, Matt, Scott, Sean, Sebastian, Donald, Jack. I hope I'm not missing anyone. Yeah, you guys, like I am sincerely inspired by your commitment, your dedication, and and yeah, your love for what it is that we're all trying to, this future that we're trying to create together here. So big shout out,
Thank
big
you for
thank you.
the thank you for that, Ryan. Okay, now let me go over the naughty list. I'm just kidding. I want to thank Ryan for all he's done. Ryan and the UF board in general. Ryan, Brian, and Will, which sounds like I don't know. It scans too well, but Ryan, Brian, and Will have done kind of an amazing job in being like really just sincerely dedicated to the success of these things. This thing, all of them would be more than happy to take a bullet. And if it was a choice between being on the Urbit board or the benefit of Urbit, they would, immediately shoot themselves. And that's kind of the highest praise that I know, is to basically to be loyal to something above yourself is a hard problem. Urbit always sort of, Urbit itself it's a very Luciferian system in a way. It's like basically, in some ways, I created Urbit because I would rather, rule in hell than serve in heaven. Of course, being in a system which no one else uses is hell, but we will convert it into heaven. I feel by the just continuous ostracism of Satan from our midst, right? Wherever you go, if Satan is not there, then it is heaven. And Satan still lurks in various ugly pieces of the urban system, but we will drive him out. And so that feeling of, I think, the thing that is really impressive about working with these guys is like how, when I work with Ryan in specific, one of the things that I notice is that we're both very, very good at and very comfortable in convincing each other of things. And we basically just like will drop our own ideas for the other person's ideas like this. Right. And that's one of the most important things in a collaborative relationship. You know, what Ryan is above all, he's just a very thoughtful person. Like, and you know, that is not, you know, the entire set of talents required to be a leader, but it's a huge part of the set of talents required, you know, to be a leader. You also have to just be comfortable just hurting people. I'm just kidding. But you know, that's always a problem I've had, actually. You know, I used to make, when people had to be fired at Tlon, I would always make Galen do it, and even Galen didn't want to do it, but I think he's learned to enjoy it. But you know, which makes him a better leader than me. But Ryan has, you know, he's the you know, if we were the Iliad, you know, I think Ryan would be Nestor or someone like that, and you know, he's a person who has that kind of aura. So I'm enormously grateful for his wisdom in driving us through this, and this you know, complex affair that I feel like we're you know, very close to being on the other side of. No details can be offered, but I think we're doing great there. And of course, everything could still blow up, but I think we're doing great. But you know, I think what's noticeable about the state of Urbit today is, of course, we're striving to keep the centralized organizations that contribute in various ways to Urbit healthy. It's certainly been a valuable process in getting us here. But frankly, I'm pretty confident that if somehow both Tlon and the Urbit Foundation were obliterated tomorrow by meteorites or perhaps the Ukrainian special services, you know, I'm pretty confident that the system would continue to exist. Um, and, you know, that's, I think, kind of, and would even eventually take over the world. It would just take a little bit longer to take over the world. And that's, you know, obviously not solely due to my efforts, that's solely due to the efforts of a very, very large number of people. And, you know, we're just out here like making this thing real. And it's like, I think that people have in the world have no idea how close to being real it is. I don't think people have a freaking clue. Like, it's hard to explain to people. It's hard to show people. It's just like, you know, we've come from 2% to 98%, and it's very frustrating because 98% is still not quite real yet. But you know what? It's a big difference between that and 2%. And I think we're very close to finishing that. Thank you all for showing up. Especially, I'd like to thank, you know, Mozduck for showing up in his ALS mask. That's quite a thing. Thank you, Mozduck. And I'd like to thank everyone who showed up. Really fun podcast, or not podcast. Are we putting this on the internet somewhere? I think it might be fun to put it on the internet, Jack.
Yeah, it's recorded, so you can upload it.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Just like namtyv rhymes with handjive. And on that note, I love you all. Let's go out and have a wonderful 2025 and make this shit 100% real. Thank you so much. Take care, guys.